In this two-part video, I recommend 5 novels for you to read. 5 books I love. Each one is moving in its own special way. Each one is beautifully written. Each one has enriched my English. Each one has given me an insight into people, places and cultures that are different from my own. Most importantly though, each one has left me with a deeper understanding of myself. Why should you read a novel? I would say for pure pleasure. But if that's not enough for you, let me tell you that it has many other benefits. Studies show that reading strengthens your brain and can stop cognitive decline. Reading about the inner thoughts and feelings of characters trains you to empathize better with people, especially with people who are different from you. It helps reduce stress and improve your sleep. When I had interviewed SHASHI Tharoor and asked him to introduce us to a new word, this is what he had said.
Well, when a kid asked me that at a gathering in a school in Trivandrum, I told him the word that I would introduce him to was to read. And he'd come across his own words, and I wouldn't have to spoon-feed him a word.
So yes, reading builds your vocabulary and improves your English. Plenty of reasons to start reading in case you don't already. Read whatever you feel like. But if you don't know what to read, here are some recommendations. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, the debut book of author Mark Haddon, is pegged as a mystery novel. Appropriately, the title of the book is inspired by an observation that Sherlock Holmes, the famous fictional detective, made in the short story The Adventure of Silver Blaze by Arthur Conan Doyle. In fact, the plot of that story hinges on the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime, which of course is different from the curious incident described in the Mark Haddon novel. For me, more than a mystery novel, it's a sweet and touching story of a teenage boy who experiences the world differently from many of us. And this happens to be the book that I have recommended most often to friends who say they don't read much but want to make a start. They all ended up loving it. This 2003 book is a first-person narrative of a 15-year-old English boy who describes himself as a mathematician with some behavioral difficulties. While it is not mentioned in the story, it seems as if the boy is on the autism spectrum, which is what makes his reactions to things unique and him as a character special. You feel privileged to get a peek into what goes on inside the boy's head. And you can't but come away from this book without feeling that you have a better understanding of a person with this sort of condition. Haddon clarifies in a blog post that the book is not about any specific condition or disorder though, but rather about being an outsider, about seeing the world in a surprising and revealing way. I wholeheartedly agree with him. Early in the story, the boy decides to investigate the suspicious death of his neighbor's dog. He records his experiences in a murder mystery novel he is writing. He lives with his father who has told him his mother is dead. He later discovers letters from his mother that were written after the date of her supposed death. And so the plot thickens. The chapter numbers in the book are prime numbers rather than the usual consecutive numbers. This little quirk is connected to the fact that the protagonist is a mathematician. And there is a belief that those on the autism spectrum often have an above average aptitude for numbers. What is a prime number, you ask? It is a number greater than 1 that can only be divided by 1 and itself. 2, 3, 5 and 7, for example. Take 7. It can only be divided by 1 and 7. On the other hand, 9 can be divided not only by 1 and 9, but also by 3. Therefore, it's not a prime number. So the book chapters are numbered 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, etc. You might think I have a fascination with civil war, given that 2 of my recommendations are novels set in civil wars, though in 2 different parts of the world. Coincidentally, both are by women authors. The first of these 2 is Cartography, written by Kamila Shamsi, and is set in Karachi. Its main characters are a girl called Raheen and a boy called Kareem. Friends almost from before birth, thanks to the intertwined stories of their parents. The families are unusually close. Their fathers had swapped fiancés at a point in time. That's what makes the connection between the two so intense and complex. Inseparable, Raheen and Kareem even dream each other's dreams. Can angels lie spine to spine? Shamsi asks. If not, how they must envy us humans. The milieu of the characters is high society Karachi, but in some ways it could just as well be Mumbai or Delhi. Behind it all is the history of the turbulent war between West and East Pakistan that gave rise to Bangladesh, told through flashbacks that linger on into the present. The fact that Kareem's mother is Bengali makes the civil war a personal issue for him, and he turns to map making, cartography, to find a way to make sense of things. He maps not just places and people, but in a sense differences in cultural identities and the conflicts they produce. As Raheen puts it, from there to here is no distance at all, if we look at the map of the world. But distance is not about miles and kilometers, it is about fear. The letter K seems to have a special significance for the author. She spells the book title Cartography with a K in place of the usual C. The cartographer in the story is Kareem with a K. He lives in and maps Karachi, which starts with a K. And the author's first name, Camilla, also has the initial K. Is it based on the same numerology that led to the slew of so-called K serials that ruled the Indian airwaves at one time? Perhaps not, but it does seem to be the signature initial of the book. With Kareem and Rahim's friendship destined to turn into love, Cartography is above all a moving romantic tale. It's hard not to feel the love in the story. It's hard to be dry-eyed by the end of it. I'll end my take on the book with one last quote. I'm sorry, I love you. Or was that a soil speck, not a full stop, between the first sentence and the second? The Golden Gate is the first novel written by Indian English author Vikram Seth. What is unique about this little gem is that it is written in verse. Now, those of you who are not into poetry might think that it's not for you, but let me assure you that you are mistaken. You get so caught up in the lives of the characters in the story, and the rhyming is so effortless that in a way you hardly notice that the book is written in verse. This is an extraordinary feat, given that Seth wrote the novel in a complex rhyme scheme called iambic tetrameter. The book follows the lives of a group of yuppies, its protagonists, who live in 1980s San Francisco, the Californian city with the world-famous Golden Gate Bridge that gives the novel its name. If you get scared off by the idea of a novel written in verse, imagine how publishers initially reacted. In fact, Seth put a verse about that in the book as well. Let me recite it for you. A week ago, when I had finished writing the chapter you've just read, and with avidity undiminished, was charting out the course ahead, an editor at a plush party, well-wined, provisioned, speechy, hearty, hosted by long-live Thomas Cook, where my Tibetan travel book was honored, seized my arm. Dear fellow, what's your next work? A novel. Great. We hope that you, dear Mr. Seth, in verse, I added. He turned yellow. How marvelously quaint, he said, and subsequently cut me dead. And yet once it got published, The Golden Gate not only got critical acclaim and awards, but became a bestseller. While the book does have deeper themes in it, it is also a thoroughly Californian story replete with bumper stickers, billboards, and complex romances. The Golden Gate is composed of 590 Onegin stanzas. That is, sonnets written in iambic tetrameter. This type of stanza gets its name from the Russian novel Eugene Onegin, written by Alexander Pushkin in the same rhyme scheme. Vikram Seth was a graduate student of economics at Stanford University, California, when he came across two English translations of Pushkin's book at a bookstore. Both maintained the stanzas in iambic tetrameter like the original. He was fascinated by its form, so much so that he was inspired to write a book in the same format. But before he could do it, he lived, breathed, and dreamt the rhyme scheme for a year. Thus, it became so much a part of him that he could write the Golden Gate in a way that made the complex rhyme scheme seem effortless. This brings us to the end of the first part of my video on book recommendations. Watch out for the concluding part. If you have a favorite novel, do mention it below, and if you haven't read the books on my list, I hope you will soon. Do subscribe to me on YouTube, click on the bell icon too. Happy reading, I'm the Englishman. Bye for now.